Greenland is the largest island in the world, covered by ice, and I think it's clear by now Trump's America will take Greenland. I'll get into why the decision will be made and if it has good reasons. Though it showed up in popular news today, the US has had a nail-biting experience with Greenland. First off, the Greenlanders hate the Danes. Denmark had a colonial relationship with Greenland, would restrict Greenlanders to only trade with Denmark. Even as recent as the 1960s, Denmark did a forced contraception program on the indigenous Greenlanders. Denmark has since apologised for that. They invest highly in Greenland now, but still that left a sour taste in their mouths obviously. As in Greenland's first statement, when another country is threatening to invade them, is we don't want to be Americans, we don't want to be Danes. They said they don't want to be Danish in response to America threatening to annex them. I think that shows right there their contempt. Despite Denmark contributing 50% of Greenland's budget and the fact they wouldn't be viable as an independent country, they still want to be. Greenland also politically leverages the USA's nervousness about China. Greenland asked Denmark to build an airport, and if they didn't, they'd have China do it. Greenland asked for investments in mining, or they get China to do it. Greenland constantly threatens to go to China. Here, a move by Denmark to pay for upgrades to Greenland's airport infrastructure may have kept China out for now, but its influence in the Arctic will continue to grow, which gives Copenhagen a stake in the first two airports, means that the Chinese company involved in the bidding process for the construction works will now likely not be chosen to improve aviation infrastructure in the country with a few roads. While it is still possible that China's communications construction company, the only non-Western company among the 6 bidders, could be awarded the construction contract, the fact that Copenhagen will front a large portion of the required funds reflects its desire to avoid Greenland falling into the debilitating debt trap that is becoming all too common with Chinese infrastructure projects, in which Chinese banks loan the money for construction and Chinese companies carry it out. Greenland warns it may turn to China if US and EU shun mining investments. Greenland's government is calling on the United States and the European Union to step up investments in its mining sector over excluding influence in the Arctic to China. In an interview with the Financial Times, Business and Mineral Resources Minister Naja Nathanielsen said the semi-autonomous Danish territory needs outside capital to diversify its economy and develop key industries like mining and tourism. While Greenland prefers Western partnerships, she has warned that continued hesitation could force the government to consider Chinese investors. There's tons of examples of this sort of game, making the United States freak out over and over again that China will take over what's in the Americans' backyard. Can Greenlanders really blame anyone but themselves that Trump feels only direct ownership of Greenland can keep out China? They've clearly done everything to agitate against Denmark and seem to want to float away to China. Clearly the great autonomy given to them by Denmark isn't working as they still have campaigns for independence. Clearly they don't like Denmark. They want more investment, and clearly the US can provide it better. This is more a realpolitik move than just psychological from Trump's team. This is also why Trump says Denmark can't defend it. The US can always move a bunch of troops there. It's about China economically dominating Greenland and creating an outpost from there for their Arctic Silk Road initiative, like they already did in so many other places. Then let's say the US goes through some crisis where it has to focus inward for a bit. Could Denmark alone stop China from stationing troops there if Greenland wanted it? What if China said to Greenland, we will invest in you until you become a rich enough country and then you can dump the Danish, stand on your own 2 feet? That sounds like a very enticing deal to Greenland, and I wouldn't be surprised if these talks have occurred already and they're just gaining confidence now to say it out loud. 84% of Greenlanders want independence after all. They're looking to become strong enough to go on its own. Now it all starts to make sense, doesn't it? When you look at a map, you may just go, Greenland is big and is right next to Canada, but it's better to watch it from a top-down globe perspective. As the ice melts, new shipping lanes will open in the Arctic, which will become critical, and there's already a battle for the future. Russia already owns much of the coastline, but let's look at Svalbard, which is about right next to Greenland, and what could become Greenland's future, showing the Americans what could happen if Greenland is left to its own devices. Officially, it's owned by Norway, but Russia also claimed it. Resources were found on it, so a treaty was done in 1920 saying it's owned by Norway, but nations have free access to its waters, mining and hunting, making it a free economic zone. But Norway has claims to restrict the fishing in the exclusive economic zone. It's a complicated situation. Russia is now testing that area. We need to pay closer attention to Svalbard. The archipelago is located nearly 1,000 kilometers from Norway's northernmost city, and is now home to just 3,000 or so people. In recent years, however, Russia has repeatedly used it to experiment with different provocations, and now the Kremlin has accused Norway of militarizing the archipelago, creating a potential pretext for military action. The Soviet Union signed the Svalbard Treaty in 1935 and proceeded to organize a Soviet presence centered around the coal mines around there. In fact, the Soviets built a model village that functioned like a mini Soviet Union until 1998, when Russia closed its Svalbard mines and the company town was hastily abandoned. But Russia didn't completely leave Svalbard. Rather, in recent years, Russian officials and other representatives have been conducting various manifestations on the archipelago. For example, in 2015, Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin, who had been sanctioned by the West, landed on Svalbard without Norway's permission and proceeded to mock Norwegians on social media. Then, on May 9, 2023, Russians conducted a military-style victory parade led by the Consul General, the Barents Observer reported. Last year, the director and others planted Soviet flags in the area. Norway cannot defend Svalbard and stop Russia from militarizing the island. Russia is deeply entrenched in what will become an unsinkable aircraft carrier in this place. Just having a few coal mines there is turning into a military presence. This could happen with Greenland. China invests in a port. The port uses almost all Chinese workers, like the other ports, like in Greece. The port uses China's ships. It sounds minor, but the cargo ships they make have missiles attached to them now. That's militarizing all their ports for power projection. China released publicly their Arctic policy. China describes itself as a near-Arctic state. China is an important stakeholder in Arctic affairs. Geographically, China is a near-Arctic state, one of the continental states that are closest to the Arctic Circle. The natural conditions of the Arctic and their changes have a direct impact on China's climate system and ecological environment, and in turn on its economic interest in agriculture, forestry, fishery, marine industry, and other sectors. Quote, melting ice in the Arctic has led to changes in the natural environment, or possibly can result in accelerated global warming, rising sea levels, increased extreme weather events, damaged biodiversity, and other global problems. On the other, with the ice melted, conditions for the development of the Arctic may be gradually changed, offering opportunities for the commercial use of sea routes and development of resources in the region. Commercial activities in the region will have a considerable impact on global shipping, international trade, and energy supply, bring about major social and economic changes, and exert important influence on the way of work and life of the Arctic residents, including the indigenous peoples. They may also pose a potential threat to the ecological environment of the Arctic. The international community faces the same threat and shares the same future in addressing global issues concerning the Arctic. When global crises arise like the plague, the world wars, now the climate change, there's a lot of death and misery, but then there's new opportunities as the world's balance of power shift. Before the Napoleonic Wars, Spain owned most of the Americas. France had a huge part of current-day USA. What happened then? Spain lost all its American holdings, becoming a middle power. France sold off its holdings, which allowed the US to expand coast to coast. It left Britain as the sole superpower and the world police. Then came along a period of relative peace after. We as people adjust. So countries are already planning ahead, and there's a battle for the Arctic. China, being the workshop of the world, needs shipping routes to do business, and currently all shipping routes today are controlled by the US or its allies and can be easily blocked off in the event of war. If China controls the Arctic, they can bypass America. How did the US come to control all the shipping lanes? Through capitalism, economical domination. It's the same playbook. There's nothing more a country fears when their tricks for world domination is turned around on them. Trump is going for Greenland now, despite if it loses him the European continent, because the American hegemony is in deep decline. At the fall of the Soviet Union and its economic collapse, writers theorized an end of history. America will be the sole world power, world police, spreading liberal democracy. No other empires will rise. It's America forever. So what Americans thought would last forever is coming to a close within decades. This is a total shock to the system. A communist country like China is rising and is creating its own hegemony. Why would America risk it? It takes a while for people to notice the empire's power is declining. When Trump first came in 2016 with his Make America Great Again slogan, people thought it was a racist sign. America is already great, the sole world power, so he's talking about when there was more of a white people. Seriously, this was the political talk in 2016. Let me put it into better perspective. Why did you see the US jump into the Russia-Ukraine conflict, giving hundreds of billions saying we must save democracy from tyranny?
I commend all the nations that stepped up when it counted to stand with Ukraine. I've said before, Russia will not prevail in this war. Ukraine will prevail in this war, and we'll stand with them every single step of the way. That's what the compact says, loudly and clearly. And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President, I'm better. You are a hell of a lot better.
Now suddenly Ukraine is Europe's problem. Even now people in Trump's team are saying they need to get Russia out of China's sphere of influence. Now in their foreign policy it says America doesn't want to spread liberal democracy around the world. Why the sudden shift? Ukraine was America's last attempt at imperial expansion. The Maidan coup brought in a Western-aligned government.
The stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together because you can be pretty sure.
Then they went time to bring it to NATO and the EU, economically dominate its resources. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Western governments bought time to arm the Ukrainians with a bunch of weapons and train its troops. Then when war finally broke out in 2022, American-led West sanctioned Russia and pumped Ukraine with hundreds of billions of dollars. But Ukraine's still losing, while China helps keep Russia standing. This is America trying to save face because it shows it's no longer a single world hegemon. Before you went against the US, you were toast. You had to participate in the Western economic system. Now a country can fight a war longer than World War II and still keep it together. The European Union is also building stronger institutions. The European Union is on the road to becoming a single country. People seem to think it just controls trade agreements and movement. It already controls everything about a country, including how you deal with cultural minorities. In the Lisbon Treaty, the European Parliament is superior to national governments. If you want a sovereign foreign policy like Hungary, the EU will cut off funds. This is why the United Kingdom left the EU. Despite how many times they tried to reform it to just be a single market with less regulations, it get almost nowhere. This is why Barack Obama flew to Great Britain to tell Prime Minister David Cameron to stay in the EU. Why Barack Obama said the UK gets put to the back of the line in trade deals, because the UK was the only big country who was trying to prevent a full federation. The EU is already now a confederation of sorts, but it will continue to gain power and push out national governments like it's done for decades now. So when the EU, its economy a bit bigger than China, becomes a federal country, will it still be a US puppet state who will do their bidding? Already they're stepping out making deals with Asian countries like China, taxing tech companies, they're testing the waters. The Russia threat is a perfect pretext for the EU to take more power and create a European army they personally command. So would you say it's better the US take Greenland when the EU is weak rather than strong and it becomes yet another rival like China did? There's reasons why guys like Steve Bannon want to break the EU apart. It threatens American hegemony and therefore American business interests now, as America is an economic empire. USA secures South America like the move they did with Venezuela, secures Canada, Greenland will make a continental fortress no other power can penetrate. Keep the largest navy, control of the sea lanes, it's impossible to penetrate. When you're a declining empire, you must negotiate your way out to where you can keep your security without having to have bases all over the world. If the US was a European power, they'd be looking to secure Europe through an organisation like the EU, try to reapproach Russia to secure that barrier. But it's on the Western Hemisphere and is by far the strongest country in that area, with a long foreign policy of securing it through the Monroe Doctrine. European powers should also be afraid, as there's quite a few European holdings in the Americas. French Guiana is at the top of Brazil and the largest European holding on mainland America. Quite a few Caribbean islands are held by the Netherlands, the British, the French. Although they can be naval bases, they're a bit too small to stage much of a threat. Iceland also is part of the GI-UK gap. Greenland, Iceland, UK. If the US wants to continue to strengthen its defence in its declining hegemony world, Iceland could be next to secure that route. Otherwise, it falls into the European sphere. Trump's friend that got appointed to be an ambassador to Iceland made a joke about Iceland becoming the 52nd state. It starts off as jokes until it becomes real. Nothing ever happens until it all happens. Jan Mayen too. If you play this like a map game, you go after all of these. The European Union has a mutual defence clause, with some members having opt-outs like the Republic of Ireland. Greenland is considered an outer territory of the EU, so not a full actual member. When the European Union President Ursula von der Leyen was asked, does that mutual defence clause extend to Greenland, she declined to answer. I think that speaks a lot that nobody will defend it, which of course, Europe is all protectorate of the USA. They can't adjust to it being an enemy, nor is there any way to defend Greenland. The US has the largest navy in the world, and the only country that can even transport troops by ship is the United Kingdom, who isn't bound by any treaty in any way to defend Greenland. Nor would it do much anyway. Greenland is across the world from Europe. Europe has been preparing for a land war with Russia. There's just no way to protect it, other than Danish troops already there, giving a heroic, stubborn battle for it, which would be quite short. It's not easy to do guerrilla warfare either. First, the US can easily blockade it, but it's all ice and has small towns. Just some surveillance drones around the urban centres would leave rebels helpless. So no, Europe can't do anything. It'd be like taking candy from a baby. The consequences of this will be Europe most likely kicking US troops off the continent, which would leave the US pretty helpless to do wars in the Middle East. Depending on if Turkey stays an ally to the US or not also, I think the US then goes all in on securing the Western Hemisphere and focusing on the Pacific, trying to contain China. I also think the US tries to reapproach Russia and lift sanctions to get them out of China's sphere of influence. I think this also sets the domino effect for the European federalisation, where the 27 countries will need to join together and start emulating a single country to have the strength to be a world power. Then the European Union will reapproach China to fix that relationship, which was previously antagonistic because of the USA's influence. Overnight, the balance of power of the world will change forever in a huge historical event. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, providing updates in the future. Come here for common sense commentaries. Goodbye.